Hey guys, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great, as I always say. And in this video, we have more of a compilation type of thing. So, yeah, that's not much more said than that. Let's jump into it. Pull up a stump, and thank you for watching. This happened when I was in first grade, and I'm from Michigan. But for this, we were in Oklahoma for a family reunion on my grandmother's family farm. My father is waking me up early to travel into town around 3 in the morning. We are going to meet up with his old friend, whom he plans on sharing the gospel with, as he recently became a Christian. So I'm a little tired, but I'm awake. We're driving in my grandfather's Toyota Corolla, and we're on paved roads with no street lights. It's just the car's headlights. As we're driving, I'm telling my dad about a new Bionicle set that I had just gotten from my aunt, and then we hit something. This huge creature, the size of a large dog, goes running across the road, and we slam into it going at least 60. This creature had no visible features that I could remember because it was covered in long, thick, shaggy hair. The Toyota goes over the thing, and we keep driving. My father is freaked out because it's not his car and he had no idea what he just hit. So we keep driving for another 10 minutes or so before the check engine light comes on. We pull over and the front of the car is smashed in, but there's no blood in there. There's no fur. It's just crumpled metal. He calls a tow truck and we wait in the car for about 2 hours. We get into a nearby town, and we find out the car will need a couple of days of work to fix. Eventually, we use the rental the insurance company got us to get back to the farm, but there's no sign of the thing anywhere. There's no blood, no body, no sign of anything on the road. I ask my father quite often about this story, just to make sure that he remembers too, and he himself is convinced that it was a demon put on earth to stop us from seeing his friend to preach to. So what do you think? Demon? Dogman? Another creature? Let me know. In 1969, we lived in the Midwest in a house that was 100 years old at the time. My father grew up in South Africa, and we had these large wooden side tables made from tree trunks with African carvings of fierce-looking men on them. One time, this heavy table tipped over on its own in the basement. We didn't make too much of a big deal about this, but accepted our parental explanations. We also had an attic that we could not access, but we heard noises from there often. Again, not too big of a deal, until one night. My sister and I shared a room with 2 twin beds. She was about 10 and I was 8. Our routine was to talk a few minutes, then we would say to each other, "Good night," and we go to sleep. One night, after I said good night, and so did she, we both heard a distinct, deep, breathy groan come from the foot of my bed. My sister said, "What did you say?" I said, "Nothing," and we flew out of our beds to the door. The light would not come on, and the door was stuck shut. It was terrifying. Our screams brought our parents, who could finally open the door. We moved our room downstairs to a den, and we both refused to ever sleep there again. I'm not sure if it's related, but shortly after our move to the lower room, there was a bat in the corner of the room one day. I don't miss that house at all. I was visiting a friend who I worked with one day, who was a massage therapist. I asked her, "How do you touch all those people and not be affected by their negative energies or feelings?" My friend replied, "I pray and I meditate to protect myself." I replied, "That's so beautiful." Immediately, she snapped loudly, "There you go, trying to be more spiritual than me." Her voice was raised and very angry. I was shocked. I gently said, "I'm not trying to be anything, I'm just saying something kind to you." The more gentle I approached her, her anger multiplied, and I felt an intense hatred, and I became afraid. I repeated, "This is not about me, I was just seeing some beauty, and I commented on it." And again, every kindness I gave was returned with more anger and hatred. I became scared and was crying, and I said, "I need to go." As I began to walk towards the door, I had to pass a table that had a bunch of papers on it. When I passed the table, all the papers flew off right in front of me. I bolted out of there. When I got to my car, I needed to get something out of the glove box. But when I opened the glove box, there were tons of creepy little black bugs swarming the box, and I was mortified. I have never seen such bugs again in my life since. I wanted so much to rid the bugs then and there, but my need to get as far away from this house and person was so strong that I chose to leave and address the bugs at a safer location. So this is a story about my Irish grandfather and our encounter together. So this happened when I was 23 years old. I'm Irish, but I was raised in New York since childhood, so I don't really have an accent or any memories. I don't really know anything about my extended family, except that my mom was adopted and my dad has family in the IRA. I've never actually been outside of the US, except for one time we went to Mexico for a vacation about 10 years ago or something. But one day, I receive a call from a blocked number claiming that it's my grandpa. He has a very thick Irish accent. Now, I've never spoken to my grandfather. I only even know what he vaguely looks like from an old photo that my dad keeps on his desk. At first, I was very skeptical that it was even him, but he tells me in detail about my dad and about things that not many people could know. I won't repeat them here. I am emotionless throughout this whole thing. He tells me that he's dying, and I'm the only family he has left who's willing to visit him. He asked me not to tell my dad about this call or else he'll try to keep me from going. And I say, okay, I guess. He sends me the plane tickets over email and says take the third exit. I'll be wearing a green tie. Already this guy is kind of making me angry. He didn't ask if I was willing. He didn't ask whether I wanted to do this, or even if it works for my schedule. He just somehow found out everything about how to contact me and told me to be there. Nevertheless, I'm intrigued. I can't just let the only remnant of my heritage slip by, so I decide to go. The trip itself, to get there, goes fine, smooth sailing. I land at the airport, and when I land, I go to the third exit to see him. He's a tall man, maybe 6'4", thin, silvery hair. He looks surprisingly like he did in the picture, just a bit wrinklier. He's still standing up straight, moving quickly, looking fit and healthy. He shakes my hand and smiles, telling me to come with him. We spend a few hours driving around, catching up with each other. It turns out my dad didn't want me to meet him because he was in the IRA. Who would have guessed? He left the IRA 20 years ago, but Dad wouldn't give him a chance to get in contact. He's been living in limbo ever since. No rebel brothers to back him up, and no society to accept him due to his past. He refuses to move from the hometown for some reason. I remember him saying, "I've lived me whole life in this town, and I'll die on these green hills." Eventually, the conversation turns to him dying. He tells me that sometime soon he will die, and I'm thinking, what? Like, you're healthy, you're still spry, what's going on? I ask him if it's an IRA hit, and he says no. He tells me that it's something more sinister, but refuses to specify. And when he says stuff like this, I'm starting to get some schizo vibes from the old man. He goes on telling me how he was writing his will and realized that he didn't have anyone to pass the property to. None of his family would reply, but me, so he drove me out there. He wants me to spend a week with him, and if he's still alive, he'll just give me the property anyway. I'm very grateful for this. I kind of like this guy. It's a shame that he thinks he's going to die. We stop by the coast, and I take this cool picture of him. We eventually make it to his property and dump off my luggage, and then we make a beeline to his favorite pub. It's a nice walk, but it's getting late. After a few hours of drinking and singing and swapping stories, I decide that he's had his fill. We finish our drinks and we start to walk home, singing our songs. And we're singing Whiskey in the Jar and songs like that. Suddenly, I hear a woman scream really, really loud. It pierces our singing. Grandpa just stops and starts crying. I think someone might be getting mugged, but I can't find the source of the scream. It stops right there, so I decide to call the police. Grandpa stops me and tells me not to bother. When we walk home, he sings this weird song. I remember the part of the song that went, "Perhaps it's just the wind that's whistling round the window pane, or maybe it was the thunder, or the rhythm of the rain." We walk the rest of the way home, and I fall asleep on the couch. But in the next morning, when I wake up, he's dead. The pastor throws a huge funeral because people should be forgiven of their sins and all that stuff that I don't really get. I never ended up getting the property. He died before he could sign me into the will, so it just went to the government by default. I spent a few days in a hotel and then took a plane back. It doesn't take a genius to figure out what's going on here. I'm at least 90% sure that my grandpa and I had an encounter with what's called a banshee, and for my grandpa, it wasn't the first time. I do have one story that happened to my family in the 80s. Now, I wasn't around at the time, but everyone talked about it for years after, and this is how I heard it. So my whole family was having this party on a property that had a small house with a very huge yard. The uncles and parents are drinking outside. The moms and aunts are cooking and talking inside. The kids are playing just wherever. And it's around 6 p.m. The sun is starting to set. There's this small area shaped like a cave where tools, wood, scrap, and all that kind of just leftover stuff is stored. Out of nowhere, the kids start screaming and running away from the cave. They all tell their respective dads and uncles that there is something in the cave, but they ignore the kids. They tell Grandpa, who goes there to investigate for them. As he is getting inside, he describes seeing a little man peeking out from one of the corners. It is mumbling something. Grandpa calls for some help, so everyone runs over towards where he is. Everyone gathers at the cave area, and they hear noises inside. Suddenly, the little man gets out and starts running into the bushes and leaves around the property. When it got out, everyone ran away from the cave, and they could not get a good look at it. But when things settled, they started to look for the thing, traces of it, footprints, just anything. But there was nothing. Some members of the family believed that it was a duende. Some others, though, thought it was a prank from the teens playing with a puppet despite seeing the thing running. One uncle got really obsessed with duendes and similar beings, and started studying and trying to catch them for years after this. So, what'd you think of those stories? As always, let me know down in the comments. And if you have your own stories or want to donate to the channel or become a patron, all those links will be down in the description below. So, thank you for pulling up a stump, and yeah, I will see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.